This is the Hyundai Ioniq 9, the brand's biggest, fanciest, and most expensive electric vehicle ever. In fact, it's not just their most expensive electric vehicle, it's the most expensive vehicle to have ever worn the Hyundai badge in Australia. But if you can get past that sticker price, you'll find, well, a whole bunch of other numbers. There is one flagship trim level. There's a choice between 6 or 7 seats. There's 2 electric motors, and there is one battery big enough to power a small city, at least for a weekend or so. And there's at least 2 new technologies never before seen on a Hyundai. So is all of that enough to put the Ioniq 9 on your EV shopping list? Let's go find out.
Now, as I mentioned, it's not cheap, this Ioniq 9. In fact, it's Hyundai's most expensive car ever, outshining even the bonkers but brilliant Ioniq 5N. So how much are we talking? Well, you can only get one Ioniq 9, the flagship calligraphy trim, and it's yours for $119,750. There are just a couple of options from there, with the 6-seat version, an extra $2,000, which I know sounds weird to pay more for less, but you are essentially swapping the 3-seat middle row for 2 more luxurious captain's chairs. The digital side mirrors, which I hate, will cost you $3,000, and matte paint will cost you $1,000, or $250 more than the premium paint ask. Tick everything, and your Ioniq 9 is more like $125,000. As to how many Hyundai will actually sell, well, suffice it to say the brand doesn't expect it to be a huge contributor to its totals, acknowledging that the EV market is stagnant and that most EV buyers are actually upgrading from an electric vehicle rather than stepping out of an ICE vehicle, which makes the purchase pool pretty shallow. Still, Hyundai is on track to sell around 150 of the 6-figure Ioniq 5Ns this year, so there are clearly some EV buyers with deep pockets. Anyway, you get just about everything Hyundai can throw at a vehicle, including full LED lighting, 21-inch alloys, a big panoramic sunroof, and a hands-free powered boot. Inside, there are real Nappa leather seats, tri-zone climate control, heated and ventilated seats in the first and second rows, and a heated steering wheel. There's a big infotainment screen with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, a digital dash and a head-up display, and a 14-speaker Bose stereo, and there's a total of 6 USB connections. But there's no vehicle to load, which means you forgo the household-style power outlet found in some EVs. There are also a couple of firsts for Hyundai, including the ability to load your digital key into your phone's wallet, meaning you can unlock and drive just using your device, and it's the first time Hyundai has deployed active noise cancellation too.
Now, I don't want to sound like a hackneyed football commentator here, but for mine, the Ioniq 9 really is a tale of 2 halves. The first half, the front end, I really like. I love this kind of vertical and horizontal light treatment, and I love the rounded kind of edges, which still give it a whole bunch of road presence. And I also like some of this really nice detailing through the body, which kind of breaks up the slab-sidedness of it all. I don't like, however, the boot, which has this kind of weird old school station wagon vibe, and for mine just doesn't work with this car. So, flagship car, flagship price, but at least there's also flagship technology and materials. I can use my mobile phone as the key now, for example. It's the first time I've been able to do that in a Hyundai. These seats are actual Nappa leather, not the artificial stuff. And there's also whatever the hell this material is, which kind of reminds me of a pair of snakeskin pants, but not really in a good way. Now, elsewhere, this steering wheel is a little bit too big, in my opinion. It makes me feel a bit like I'm steering a boat, but I do love the kind of minimalist design of it. And the twin screen setup is now pretty familiar in Hyundai products, but that still works really well too.
It's a big unit, the Ioniq 9, measuring more than 5 metres long, just under 2 metres wide and around 1.8 metres in height, and the weight is a hefty 2.7 tonnes at its heaviest too, while brake towing is pegged at 2.5 tonnes. So big numbers and a big vehicle with big storage. With all 3 rows in place, you get 338 litres, but treat it like a 5-seater and you get 908 litres. Drop both rows and you'll get a massive 2,410 litres.
Now, you have to take my word for it. There is plenty of room in that middle row, whether you go for the 6 or 7-seat configuration. But kudos to Hyundai for not forgetting about those in the 3rd row either. Not only is there a fair bit of room back here, as you can see, but I also have my own power outlet, my own air vents, my own speakers, and I can even recline the back seat as I wish and get comfortable. So really not too terrible a place to spend time. Now, because there's only one flagship grade of this in Australia, it makes this section relatively easy because you can have your Ioniq 9 in exactly one flavour, and that is twin motors, so one front, one rear, all-wheel drive, and a total 314 kilowatts and 700 newton meters. And believe me when I tell you that last number is important. I have lived in apartments smaller than this car, but it still feels plenty sprightly. Now, that big battery I mentioned earlier, that's 110.3 kilowatt hours, which unlocks a 600 kilometre driving range on the WLTP cycle. But be warned, if you get a little bit too enthusiastic with the accelerator, that number is sure to come right back down. Our in-car display has a minimum range and a maximum range, and let me tell you, there's a big gap between those two numbers. Now, when it comes time to plug in, it rides on an 800 volt architecture, which means you can access 233 kilowatt DC fast charging, which the brand tells me will take you from 10% to 80% charged in just 24 minutes. Let me tell you a little bit more about the drive experience. And I think the very first thing you notice here is just how quiet they managed to make this cabin. Hyundai has said that was a huge focus of this vehicle. In fact, the Ioniq 9 debuts some new technology for Hyundai, active noise cancellation. Other brands do offer it, but it's the first time Hyundai's done so. And I gotta say, it all seems to be working pretty well. This is a typically coarse kind of country B road, and there's really not a lot of tire noise, almost no wind noise, and the cabin's always calm and quiet. And that's true even on the freeway to get here. We were traveling at 100, 110 kilometers an hour, and it was always calm and pretty cosseting in the cabin. The other really interesting thing about the drive experience, and honestly, I can't believe I'm saying this, but it feels kind of surprisingly dynamic for a vehicle this big. Now, part of that is that big fat wave of torque that just always seems available when you're pushing out of a corner, but we're taking some pretty enthusiastic corners at a fairly good clip here, and it's hanging on pretty well. There's no real squeals from the tires, not a huge amount of understeer or anything like that. It feels pretty capable, surprisingly so for a car this big and with this many seats. But I guess I'd have to say, if you're really seeking out alpine roads in this, you're probably doing something wrong. This is a big, comfortable, cosseting family vehicle, one that's improved by the fact that it has electric motors, because you don't have any gearbox to deal with or any engine whine. It is just constant, smooth, steady power whenever you put your foot down. But here's the really interesting bit. It almost doesn't matter what I say about this car or how well I think it drives. Nobody's going to buy one. And Hyundai seem to know that. They say that it's an EV, and they admit that EV sales are stagnant at best in Australia at the moment. It's also very expensive, the most expensive Hyundai ever. And that it can be a psychological leap for people to get to as well, especially because they're cross-shopping this against some fairly premium brands now as well. All of which is really why Hyundai only brought in the single trim level, the single flagship trim, mind you, just to really test the waters. But they know it's not going to be a big mover for the brand. They say they just wanted a kind of flagship EV to sit above their EV range. But don't expect to see too many of them on the road. But honestly, that's something of a shame, because I do really, really like the way this car drives. It is not only comfortable and quiet on the freeway, but it's far more fun than you might be expecting on the twistier stuff too. Provided, of course, your kids don't get seasick. The other downside with driving, shall we say, enthusiastically, is that it does have something of a negative impact on the range available in this car. So I've got a live readout on my screen here in front of me. It says my maximum range currently available from that giant battery that's underneath me is 472 kilometers. Sounds pretty good. But the minimum range on offer is 222 kilometers. That's a pretty wide gap, isn't it? So if you're traveling longer distances, maybe ease off the accelerator ever so slightly. You can also choose between conventional wing mirrors like this car has, or the digital wing mirrors. And I gotta say, I would be going conventional every time. I just find the digital ones a little bit off-putting, not least of which because they seem to zoom so close on the car behind you that you can almost see what the people had for breakfast. You can see the food in their teeth. It's really disconcerting. Conventional mirrors for the win.
The Ioniq 9 is yet to be crash tested by ANCAP, but the results from its European testing will soon be published, and those results will be adopted here. Hyundai says it's shooting for 5 stars. There are 10 airbags and just about every active safety system you can poke a stick at, all wrapped up in what Hyundai calls its Smart Sense suite of technologies, including the new for the brand Highway Driving Assist 2, which acts as a lane-centering smart cruise control, but that can also take evasive action should someone swerve into your lane. 5 years and unlimited kilometres is still the pretty underwhelming norm at Hyundai. The battery is covered for 8 years or 160,000 kilometres. Happily, servicing is pretty infrequent, with intervals pegged at 2 years or 30,000 kilometres, and as a result, the first 6 years of servicing will cost a total $2,005 or an average $334 per year.
I don't love the price, but I otherwise do really quite like this Ioniq 9. It really surprised me on the road too, and I mean that in a good way. There's plenty of smooth, powerful performance, lots of space, and lots of equipment. You're unlikely to see too many of these on the road, and I reckon that might be a bit of a shame. Anyway, to read my full review on this car and on thousands of others, head on over to carsguide.com.au.